If I say to you the words sanctuary, preserve, and protect, does it make you think of global government? These are words that you hear associated with Agenda 21. And what is Agenda 21? I thought that Colonel McAllister was going to steal my speech there. Agenda 21 is the United Nations agenda for the 21st century. Since no politician would ever get elected on a platform of Agenda 21, it's most often called sustainable development. And it's important that we understand that sustainable development is not a left or right, it's not a Republican or Democrat issue. It is an issue of global governance versus national and individual sovereignty. It's about a few global elite ruling the rest of us and using the environment as bait. The definition of sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And it's no surprise that this is almost exactly word for word from the 1977 Soviet Constitution. In order to understand sustainable development, it's easier to understand what is not considered sustainable. That would be grazing of livestock, plowing of soil, fences, single-family homes, golf courses, paved roads, dams, and economic systems that fail to put the proper value on the environment, or capitalism. The objectives of sustainable development are to reduce consumption, and consumption will be reduced by created crises and scarcities. To establish social equity, this means wealth redistribution on a global and a national scale, and preserve and restore biodiversity. That means to put nature before man in every decision, both individually and collectively. Sustainable development is based on a precautionary principle that if anything might threaten nature in the future, it must be avoided. And our local fishing industry is suffering under this precautionary principle right now. This is what these restrictions on where and when the fishermen can fish and the catch limits, this is where this comes from. So how does sustainable development fit into the founding of our country? Well, our Declaration of Independence says that you are born with rights and that the government is there to protect them, and that you and your labor belong to you. And the UN Declaration of Human Rights says that government grants rights and can take them away, and you and your labor belong to the community. So how did Agenda 21 come to be? In 1992, there was an Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. At that time, a man named Maurice Strong was the Secretary General of the UN. And Maurice Strong stated that the current lifestyle of the middle class with high meat intake, air conditioning, and single-family homes was not sustainable. And by the way, Mr. Strong was a Canadian who made a fortune in the oil business. At that same Rio summit was George Herbert Walker Bush. He signed for the United States to be one of 178 countries to adopt and implement Agenda 21. And as Colonel McAllister said, it was never ratified by our Senate. Bill Clinton came along, and 7 months into his first term, he signed an executive order that established the President's Council on Sustainable Development. And Al Gore was at his side, and he said this will forge a new partnership among representatives of industry, labor, government, environmental organizations, and civil rights organizations. Again, the Senate never ratified this. It is called a soft treaty or soft law. Other milestones for sustainable development were in 1997, the counties and mayors created the Joint Center for Sustainable Communities, and in 2001, the National Governors Association endorsed Smart Growth. These are just some of the entities that are bringing sustainable development to your neighborhood. There are government agencies, there are non-government organizations, like the Nature Conservancy and the Sierra Club. And by the way, the Nature Conservancy is the single largest landholder in the world right now. And there are also foundations such as the Pew, Carnegie, and MacArthur Foundations, and it pretty much sounds like an NPR sponsorship list, so we need to be done that quick. There are 3 E's involved in sustainable development. The first is equity. And this is redistribution of wealth both nationally and globally, with massive transfers of wealth from the United States to the developing nations. The economy is the second E, and in the economy of Agenda 21, capitalism will be replaced with public-private partnerships. The businesses remain in private hands and seek the protection of the government, and in return, the businesses promote the government agenda. GE is an excellent example of the public-private partnership, and when Mussolini did this, it was called fascism. The third E is the environment. Again, nature before man in all decisions. There are 2 action plans for Agenda 21 in the United States. One is the Wildlands Project, which deals with the rural areas, and Smart Growth, which deals with the urban areas. The purpose of the Wildlands Project is to reestablish wildlife migration corridors and get my expensive pointer out. This one is called the Y to Y, the Yukon to Yucatan corridor, and then on the east coast from Nova Scotia down directly through the peninsula of Florida. And the peninsula of Florida is a problem area for sustainable development. This is the map from the UN Convention for Biodiversity with the fulfillment of the Wildlands Project. The areas that you see in red will have absolutely no human activity. The areas that you see in yellow will have limited activity by the public-private partnerships. And the little bitty black areas will be the human settlements. And these settlements will be fenced to keep the humans in and keep them away from the nature. This is the map from the Advocates for the Use of Public Land. This is the situation of land ownership in the United States in 2005. The green is the federal land. The red is wilderness areas that are to be turned into wildlands with no human use. The methods for gathering these wildlands will be conservation easements and land trusts, and people like the Nature Conservancy play a big part in this. They get people to sign on to these agreements. They're almost impossible to get out of. And if the person decides that they want to sell their property, the property is not useful for any purpose. It cannot be built on or anything else, and so the value of it is greatly diminished. And what happens is the Nature Conservancy swoops in and buys it, and then they turn around and sell it to the federal government. And this helps to boost the acreage of the Wildlands project. There are also land grabs. You may have heard last fall that the Obama administration announced that it would seize 13 million acres of land in the western states, and this would be done under the 1906 Antiquities Act. This would make all of this acreage national monuments and forever lock away the resources. This past January, they announced that they intend to take 150,000 acres near the Everglades and turn it into wilderness, eventually to be turned into wildlands. And then in the smart growth areas, there will be heavy restrictions on development, and the development will be done by the public-private partnerships. There will be rations on public services, such as health care, and drinking water, food, and energy resources. And they say that the people who live in these high-rise apartments built by the public-private partnerships will be an industrialized workforce. And Portland, Oregon, out there in the northwest, they have a big problem with sustainable development. Portland, Oregon has begun to build these high-rise buildings in the middle of the suburbs, in the middle of neighborhoods. They are building them. And of course the property value decreases and the people leave because they don't want to live next to them. And in the smart growth areas, there will of course be no cars, and they will depend on rails for transportation. And you have to wonder why these people are always touting high-speed rail. And the reason is to get from human settlement to human settlement. That is what the high-speed rail is for.